That new inflation figure will add to the concerns of millions across the country, 10.1%. And there is help out there for those who are struggling. Among those offering assistance is Petra Dye-Davies, whose charity provides free school uniforms for kids in Merseyside. She's with us tonight on 5 News. And also we've got consumer finance specialist Sarah Pennell. Thank you to the pair of you for being with us this evening. Petra, let's come to you first of all. I mean, it's an amazing scheme, what you're doing. It's just, I suppose, it's sad, it's frustrating that it's needed.
It's very, very much needed. We've actually been running for 10 years now, but we've seen such a huge increase in the last 6 weeks particularly.
And what sort of things are... Sorry, Petra, we've just lost you a little bit there. What sort of stories are you hearing from people, and how much worse has it got in the last few weeks and months?
We're hearing actually the same kind of stories that we've heard for many years, but they are coming thicker and more often. And so people are telling us of the situation at home, that the benefits have been cut, that sad situations of parents splitting up, not being able to get help, obviously choosing between heating and eating, and then not being able to pay for uniforms. There are some uniforms which are very, very expensive, and people just cannot afford to pay for them. So we just try and help as best as we possibly can. And we actually just give everything away. We managed to do that by collecting donated clothing from schools, and they all have a donation drum in their foyers. We collect it all and we stock it in 6 hubs across the Wirral. We sort it and store it, and our wonderful team of volunteers get it all ready for the people to come in and collect it, or they make an online request. So they just put a form in online and we either deliver it to them or they collect it from us.
Okay.
But the numbers that we've seen over the last 6 weeks actually are in excess of the numbers we saw this same period for the quarter 3, 12 weeks of last year. So we have now exceeded 12 weeks worth of work in just 6 weeks. So we're actually projecting a 130% increase in people coming to our service.
OK, well, that gives us a pretty clear picture of where people in Merseyside are at the moment. And Sarah, we spoke to somebody on the show yesterday, and they talked about the fact they'd had a pay rise recently. I think that an extra £1 an hour, but that had been completely swallowed up and then some by what they were spending on their weekly shop. What sort of practical advice is there at the moment about helping?
Well, what the person you spoke to yesterday is experiencing is what everyone is, that, you know, they're spending more, but they're getting less for their money. And in terms of practical help, we know that lots of people are already making very tough choices about their spending. But I think there are a few things. So first of all, if you don't already track your spending and have a budget, then do that. And technology has made it much easier for us to track our spending. And if you bank online, you know, use an app, then normally your bank will have a budgeting tool so you can see exactly where your money goes. Otherwise, there's a government-backed website called Money Helper that has a budget. In terms of actually when you go shopping, in terms of food, because that's actually where we saw the driver for inflation. It was the basics around food that were driving inflation. So bread, cereal, cheese, eggs, milk, those kind of things. So start with your own cupboards. And I don't say that flippantly, but just look at what you have and if there's anything that you're not using. Secondly, actually really try and plan your meals. So you don't have to plan every single meal, but have a good idea of what you're going to be eating for the next few days. And I include lunches in that. If you go out to work, then packed lunches are much cheaper, even with those kind of deals. And the other thing is just don't be loyal in terms of what you're buying, the brands you're buying, the supermarkets you're buying it from. And lastly, think about how you cook the food. So we've had glorious hot weather for many people for the last few weeks. We are heading towards the autumn, but things like ovens can be an expensive way of cooking. There are other ways, your hob, microwave, slow cookers, they can be much cheaper.
OK, Sarah, it's really handy practical advice. And Sia, I know we've had loads of comments tonight on the FIFO. What sort of things are people saying this evening?
I've got to say, Dan, it's getting more and more difficult reading some of these messages. Many people really asking for advice, where they can get help. First up, Shell got in touch from Chelmsford saying, I'm now buying food every single week for at least £60 compared to every 2 weeks for £60. Something has to give. Joe from Heysham says, I'm disabled. I only eat twice a day. If that, my shopping bill is increased by almost almost 100%. I have to pay energy bills of 80% more. Care charges have increased to a level that I'm thinking of trying to manage alone. And Esther from Dudley says life is becoming so difficult for so many people. I can afford baked beans, pasta and bread, and that's it at the moment.
Oh, it's devastating, isn't it, for so many people at the moment? And Sarah, that's one of the keys, isn't it? We were talking about this again yesterday. Is I know it's horrible to hear, but it's going to get worse before things get better.
Yes, I mean, it's really tough to hear those comments. And, I wish I had better news, but we know the Bank of England is predicting that inflation will reach 13% by the end of the year. So it is going to get tougher before it gets easier. The only thing I would say is that there is some help available. So there are charities such as Turn to Us, debt advice charities such as Citizens Advice and Step Change. And we know that there are billions of pounds in benefits that are unclaimed, for example. So I would say just do reach out. They may not be able to fill the gap between what you have coming in and what you need to spend, but there may be more help than you realise.
And Petra, just on your specific issue about school uniforms, do you think we might get to a point where people are sort of banning school uniforms in the future so people can afford things?
I don't think they'll ban them, but I do hope that the schools try to make them simpler. For example, some schools have badges sewn into the pockets or printed on the pockets, which can't be passed on to a sibling or someone in another house. Some schools insist on embroidering names onto school uniforms, which is also, it's costly, but also means they can't be passed on.
Yeah.
So if schools could maybe look at a much simpler way of asking the children to wear a school uniform in the proper colours, that would help an awful lot. So generic items would save costs for the families, most definitely.
Petra, Sarah, really appreciate your time and thank you for your honesty and your practical advice tonight.